Well, American journalist James Kirchick is author of The End of Europe, Dictators, Demagogues and the Coming Dark Age. He joins us from Washington. Welcome to DW. In that report, Max Hoffman has migration, EU reform and Brexit as the EU's top problems. Would they top your list?
I think those three are certainly there, but I would also add potentially the United States. And there are differing attitudes on how to deal with the Trump administration. There are some governments, or you could say some political leaders, who are more forthright in wanting to challenge Donald Trump. I would think the German foreign minister, Sigmar Gabriel, is near the top of that list, while Chancellor Merkel is obviously trying to pursue a more diplomatic, you could say, gentle path. And there are governments in Eastern Europe that are also friendlier to Washington, and particularly in Poland and Hungary. So I think certainly on how to deal with the United States, this is not really a question that we would have thought perhaps a year and a half ago, but I think how to deal with the U.S. is also topping the list. I might also put Russia up there as well. Don't forget, every 6 months, the EU has to renew sanctions on Russia that were placed on it after the invasion of Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea. And Chancellor Merkel has done a pretty fine job being able to maintain unity on that front. But there are new governments being formed. There are potentially new governments being formed as well that might want to end that policy. Certainly in Austria, with the Freedom Party in government, I wouldn't expect, immediately pushback on the sanctions, but that's a more pro-Russian political party that's now in the government in Austria.
Yeah,
and as these sanctions take a toll over time...
I'm sorry, I just wanted to pick up on that point, between Donald Trump and the Austrian People's Party. I wonder about this wave of populism that is spreading around the world. How do you see that affecting the EU, perhaps maybe even giving rise to the dictators and demagogues that you write about?
Well, I think European leaders need to understand that there are legitimate grievances that are driving this, if you want to call it, populism. I think populism is more a tactic than it is an ideology. I think the main driver of these parties that we refer to as populist is the issue of migration. Certainly, that was the major cause of the Freedom Party getting as far as it did. That's certainly what pushed the alternative for Deutschland to 13% in Germany. And it's what's helping Viktor Orban almost certainly win on third term in Hungary this year. And I think if EU leaders do not listen to what their voters want on migration, which is they want less of it, external migration, that is. I'm not talking about internal EU migration. I'm talking about external migration from the Middle East and North Africa and whatnot. I think if that is not limited or controlled or brought to a significantly lower level, then I think you will see continued support for these particular parties.
All right. And briefly, do you see any bright spots for Europe in this coming year?
Well, I think Brexit, I'm one of the few people who thinks that Brexit might not go through. I think that if the final deal comes out from the EU and is presented to the British people, and it is significantly or even moderately worse than the current arrangement that they have as members of the EU, I think there's a possibility that there could be a second referendum on Brexit. I think it's entirely rational that the British people should be given an opportunity, having voted for this, this vague idea of leaving the EU a year and a half ago, now actually being presented with the specifics of what that means.
Right.
I still think that there is absolutely there's opportunities for the French-German efforts to reform the Eurozone. I wouldn't count those out either.
So not all bleak. James Kirchick, thank you so much for joining us from Washington. Thank you.